Hi, real quick. My name is Sarah Bentley. I'm a Spanish instructor here, but I'm also the coordinator of the PCC Internationalization Initiative, which is our college's attempt to give us opportunities like this to reflect on our role in a complex global world. So learning opportunities, guest speakers, all sorts of events that let us reflect and think about what it means to live in this international world that we are. So we're happy to have our distinguished guest speaker here today, and I don't want to take any more time away from his presentation. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. And I'll pass it over to Rachel, who's going to give us more information about our speaker.
Well, I have the profoundly lucky situation here if I get to introduce Mr. Biyi Bandele, and whom I have come to admire, and although I've only met you like 10 minutes ago. But I have really come to admire both his work as a film director, but also his novels. I'm reading Burma Boy, which is a story about his father, and is a really wonderful piece of satire about colonialism during World War II. Let me go, I'm too far forward, let me back up.
Okay.
So Mr. Bandele was born in a small town, not so small, in Nigeria, sort of north central Nigeria, as I understand. Yeah. He, from Yoruba background, yes, yeah. And has, but lived in a multicultural area. He always wanted to be a writer, and he was writing from a very early age. He had some really interesting experiences as a teenager, which I'm not going to go into, which he can if he wants to, okay? He ended up in England, and he can tell you more about that as well. And in England, he really was able to flourish as a film writer, as a television director, television writer and director, as a playwright. His work has been performed at really important theaters. I can't think of the names of them at the moment, in London. And now he has this amazing film, which some of you have had a chance to see a real preview of. Anyway, I'm just so excited to be able to introduce Mr. Biyi Bandele. Let's give him a hand.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As some of you may know, I live in London, so Portland feels like home. Rain. It just rains constantly in London. Except in London right now, it's very, very, very cold. So I feel slightly overdressed, but if I take this off, I'm going to start sneezing. So I'll just just keep it on. I didn't want to make this too formal or too academic, and so I thought what I would do is show a short film, my first short film. I think it's about 6-7 minutes long, and then and it's set in London. It's called The Kiss, and then we'll just talk, and I'll talk about my work, about my career, and I'd love to have a conversation. So if anyone has comments, questions, it'd be great. So shall we? That was, as it says on the screen, that was nearly 10 years ago, and it was my very first attempt at directing a movie, and I decided to do something that was really a kind of a ghost story. I got the idea for it when a few months before I decided to write the script. I was walking through the streets of London, and every so often you would come to a pedestrian crossing where someone had been killed, you know, and there'll be flowers, and I basically that's where I got the idea from, and we made the movie for something like maybe $2,000, but actually in real fact it costs about 30, maybe 40. We got all the camera equipment for free because the cinematographer, the director of photography, was a well-known documentary DP and had a long relationship with lots of film equipment rental firms in London, and they just did him a favor and gave him all. We had like 3 huge trucks of equipment. We shot some of the shot on the streets of London, but we didn't have money to get proper permission from the authorities, and so. But because we had these 3 trucks, and we had about 40 volunteers, the entire crew was made up of volunteers. Everyone was working for free. Because we had about 40 people working on it, we had 3 huge trucks. We looked completely legit. And we had a team, we had signed a team, I'm slightly ashamed to say this, but we had a team of very pretty girls who, and the police tended to be men, whenever we saw police coming, they kind of went and did a charm offensive. And so we were able to shoot for 3 days without once being accosted by anyone. And then we had to shoot a lot of the movie in the cemetery. In that cemetery, normally to shoot just an hour, to shoot there, to have a film shoot there for an hour, cost something like between 5 and 10 grand. And we didn't have that. So my producer, a woman, went up to the guys who basically ran the place and did the charm offensive on them, and they said, okay, you guys can come and we'll just pretend you're not here. And so we just did everything. It was on a wing and a prayer. And as a result of this short film, I got my agent, directing agent. I sent it out, and I got a directing agent, and it was again I just thought I'd show that just to say it's a little bit about myself. It's my kind of attitude to doing things has always been just do it, I was born in a small town in northern Nigeria, a town called Kafanchan, in 1967. There was a war on when I was born, a war that went on for 3 years, and part of actually the movie that's brought me here, Half a Yellow Sun, is set during that war. And I knew from a very early age that I wanted to be a writer, and that came from being taken to the local library by my dad when I was about 6 years old. I discovered books. I discovered a love for books, and the desire to be a writer came from wanting to copy. So it wasn't. I didn't wake up one day and think I want to be a writer. What I did was, I started writing stories, essentially copying and plagiarizing the writers, the writers whose work I loved, and then there came a time when it was an organic thing. There came a time when I started writing about things that I saw around me in Kafanchan. My first short story was called The Pickpocket, And that was because Kafanchan was a railway town. It was a town that came into being at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, when the British built a rail line across Nigeria. And this small town happens to be more or less in the middle of the country. So if you're going from the south to the north, from the east to the west, you have to go through this town. And so there wasn't a town there. It was just, a train station. And around this train station grew this town. My dad, after he left, he was a soldier during the Second World War. He fought for the British. After he left the army, he did what his dad had done, which was to join the railways. He worked with the railways. And so I was what they called a railway kid. I spent a lot of my time as a kid in the train station. My mom had a kiosk in the train station where she sold food. So as a kid, I would just sit there and watch. And I saw lots of, I knew from a very, very early age who the thieves were, who the pickpockets were, because I could see, who the pickpockets were, who the thieves were, and who the plainclothes police officers were. It was, no one told me, I just knew. And so I kind of went from copying writers that I knew to writing about what I knew. And one of the things I knew really well was, I knew about these pickpockets. I saw them sometimes rehearsing, just kind of playing tricks on each other, So I wrote about it, and I was about 12 when I did that, and it was published in the local, the kind of regional newspaper, and that was my first piece of writing I was paid for, and then I just I continued writing. A few years later, I wrote, when I was about 16, I started work on my first, or what became my first novel. And that was later published when I moved to the UK. It was called The Man, it's a very long title, The Man Who Came In From the Back of Beyond. And I gave it that title because one of the books that I really loved reading when I was a kid was a novel about the Cold War, a spy called Smiley, a book written by a writer called John Le Carre, and it was called The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. And The Man Who Came In From the Back of Beyond got that title because Kafanchan, although it's in the middle of the country, it's very, very tiny. And if you ask most Nigerians in Nigeria, where Kafanchan is, they'll say, where? What? They'd never heard of it. And so my character is someone who kind of came from this town, this remote town, this town that no one knew, and who then goes into the metropolis and does things. And then I while I was writing this, this was before university. This was before I went to university. It was a good thing and a bad thing that I discovered very early what I wanted to do. It was good in the sense that I just concentrated on that, and just when I was at school, I quite often would get into trouble because I would be found reading. I would have a book that I was reading under the desk while the maths teacher was trying to teach, something that I really wasn't. Although I regret not actually being that interested in maths now, but I wasn't. It was good, but it was also bad in the sense that I just felt I read a lot. I spent a lot of time in the library. I was quite a voracious reader, I didn't feel the need to go to university. So I decided, and I'd read writers like James Baldwin, writers like Hemingway, who traveled to Paris and who just did, their writing there. And so I decided I was going to travel. But initially I was going to travel across Nigeria, and then I was going to travel out of the country. But I had no intention of going to university. This was in the 80s, in the mid-80s. But, I had to, because I made this decision to leave home, I had to fend for myself. So I got this job with a gambling organization. I was about 15, 16, and I got this job running about 30 pools, houses. In Nigeria, I don't know if here in the US people gamble on soccer, football. In Nigeria, people gamble on the football, the Scottish football season, the Australian football season, the UK. They gamble. They spend millions on it, and I was in charge of about 32 pools houses where people would go every day, every week, Monday to Saturday, spend a lot of money, gamble away their houses, do lots of stuff, and then my job was to take all the money the punters had brought in, take that to our headquarters, which was in the state capital, Kaduna, about 3-4 hours drive by road, and then I'd come back on Sunday morning with the winnings, and always I would go with anything from between $50,000. I mean, the naira, the Nigerian currency at the time, was actually slightly stronger than the American dollar, and I would go with anything from $50,000 to like $300,000. Now, the one catch there was that gambling was actually illegal in that part of Nigeria, and so technically what we were doing was illegal. But Nigeria is a pretty surreal country. Although it was illegal to gamble, because I was having to handle so much money. Every Saturday, I would have between 10 and 15 police officers, seriously armed, protecting me. So that was their job, because we paid them. And I was quite. I like the very young me, but it slightly scares me. I just didn't really. It was like I mean, honestly, I didn't think I was doing anything wrong, because the reason gambling was illegal in that part of Nigeria, and it's actually gambling is legal in about 60 to 70% of Nigeria. In this part of it, it wasn't legal, only because there were. Because of Sharia law, there were Muslims who lived there, but I come from a Christian background. Almost everybody who worked in gambling was Christian, and we just thought, well, this law was imposed on us, and we completely reject it. So, I mean, that was it was as simple as that. And the police were quite open to taking money from us and protecting us. So, so I did this. For just under 2 years, and then and during that period, I kind of slightly, I wasn't writing. I was making a lot of money. I was making more money than my dad, and I completely forgot about this dream of being a writer, and then I kind of went partying one day. And there was a fight, and I got knifed in the back. I got someone try to kill me. It had nothing to do with my job. It had absolutely nothing to do with it. It was just, and it wasn't someone who had any vendetta, any problem with me. I just happened to be, very sharp, close to someone holding a very sharp knife who decided to stick it in my back. And and I survived it, but it completely shook me, and I just thought, what on earth are you doing here? So I packed my bags, and I headed from the north. I headed south, where my parents originally were from, and I turned up on the doorstep of a cousin of mine, someone who hadn't seen me since I was about 3 years old, and I decided at this point that I was going to go to the UK, and I turned up at her door, and she recognized me because I looked very much like my dad, and I said that, I'd like to stay here for a few weeks until I get a visa, and she said, oh, it's fine. And 4 years later, I was still living with her and her family, and after I'd been there for basically in those days, the visa regime was, to get a visa, I mean, it's actually much more difficult now, but it was almost impossible even then. And I simply couldn't get a visa. And I'm glad I couldn't. And after I'd been with her and her family for a few months, she said, well, if you're going to stay here, you're welcome to stay as long as you want, but you have got to go to university. So so I'm really glad, actually. So I did. There's a test, an exam that you have to sit for in Nigeria to go to university, and I sat for that, passed, and I found myself studying drama at the University of Ife, which at the time was the best, without a doubt, the best university in Nigeria. I decided to study drama because, not actually because I wanted to be a playwright or to be an actor, and I knew I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't for a second think I want to be a playwright or an actor. I decided to go for drama because I looked at all the courses and I thought, I didn't want to be a lawyer, I didn't want to be, really what I should probably have studied was literature, because that was my love. But I said to myself, I don't want to sit for exams on books that I love. I might fall out of love with them. But really, to be honest, I was just being lazy. I thought, which is going to be the easier one? So I thought, so I went for drama. And then when I got into drama, I discovered that if you're studying drama at that university, you not only had to study everything in the drama curriculum, you also had to do literature as well. So it would have actually been it would have been easier for me to you had to do everything, all the kind of major courses in literature and some courses in philosophy. It was actually a more around kind of education. So I kind of, while trying to make things easy for me, I ended up making them much more complicated. But actually, I'm glad that happened. And so, because I was studying drama, I decided, okay, you've got to, I got into reading plays. I hadn't been to the theater at this point at all. Actually, to kind of rewind a little, in Kafanchan, we had a cinema, a very small cinema, which had been, it was a big hall that used to be a warehouse, and it was converted into a cinema simply by putting a 35mm projector at the back of it, painting up the wall in front white, and putting wooden benches in there. But it was, and so the first, possibly the first 500 to 1,000 movies I saw were Bollywood movies and Hong Kong karate movies, and they had a profound effect on me. The story, they knew, they were kind of mostly very kitschy, but the makers of these movies knew their audiences really well. They were not high art, but they kind of knew how to, they respected their audience, they knew how to tell a story. And we were all kids, and we would go watch these movies, and after a while, we became experts in the plot. The plots were always the same, so you kind of knew 5 minutes into it that would happen, and God help the movie that didn't conform to this standards, to this formula, because we would sit there on the benches, and if we needed action every like 3-4 minutes, and if we didn't get action, we would kind of all turn around and start screaming at the projectionist, action, action, as if, but you know, I discovered cinema. I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I discovered cinema before and TV before I ever went to a theater. So now I'm at university studying drama, and suddenly I start seeing lots of plays. I fall in love with theater, and I write my first play, a play called Rain, which was very heavily influenced by Beckett and by Harold Pinter. Although it was my first semester, my first year at university, I hadn't actually quite read any Beckett or any Pinter, but I think I had seen plays written by people influenced by them, and it was a play about two guys in a post-apocalypse world, and there wasn't a plot. They just kind of said things and had these crazy conversations, and I had a character in it who, an off-screen character, not someone they talk about, who was God, and God was always suffering from a hangover. It wasn't, it was very irreverent, and in my department, the drama department, most of the faculty were born-again Christians. A lot of the Christians were, the students were, and so this play was just offended everyone, and so they absolutely refused to put it on. It wasn't produced, but I actually wasn't. You know what? It was just infantile. I was just trying to make people laugh, and anything that was funny. It wasn't. I wasn't sophisticated enough to kind of say, okay, let me put this in here. So it wasn't or cynical enough. And then during that first semester, there was a playwriting competition was advertised. The BBC advertised a playwriting competition, and I entered the play for it. And 2 years later, it took that long. 2 years later, I got a letter telling me that the play had won this international playwriting competition. It was the first time since the 50s that competition had been won by anyone outside of North America or the UK, and so I was invited to the UK for a performance of it, and with me when I went to the UK was a copy of the manuscript of my first novel, which I'd written years earlier and hadn't been able to get a publisher for it in Nigeria. And within weeks of being in the UK, I had a publisher in Italy, a publisher in Germany, in France, and in the UK. And I just became a writer there. I got a job with a Nigerian weekly newspaper as their arts editor. I was about 21, and I'm just saying, it was just like it was, so so it was crazy because I didn't have a plan. I was just someone who just did things, and then that novel was published, and I wrote a second novel while I was in London, and it was published. And then I got a phone call from the Royal Court Theatre. Now, the Royal Court Theatre is, for new writing, is the most important theatre in the UK. It has been since the 50s. And I got a phone call from the artistic director who had read my novels and saw on the blog that I'd done a degree in drama, and he liked my writing and said, would like to commission you to write a play. And so I started writing plays for the theatre, And in 1994, I was invited to a workshop for playwrights who were interested in writing for TV. I wasn't interested in writing for TV, but there was the small thing of the £2,000 that they were paying every participant, and so I went, and the workshop was spread over 2 weekends. On the first weekend, they were not teaching us about writing because we were writers already. They were just introducing us to the world of TV. They had producers, they had directors, they had cameramen and women, just come in and talk to us. And then at the end of that first weekend, they told us all to go away and come back the next weekend with maybe a scene from a screenplay that we would love to write. So I went to, I didn't really have an idea what I was going to write, but I had worked on a novella set in London a few months earlier. I spent like a year working on it. And actually that novella got published in Germany, but I didn't, because I showed it to my German publisher. But I didn't want them to publish it. I wasn't happy with it at that point. And I put it aside with the intention of going to revisiting it later. And then this opportunity, I recognized it then immediately after the workshop. It was an opportunity, came to write for TV. So I basically adapted my own novella into a screenplay, so a full screenplay, not just a scene. And the next weekend I submitted it, and they were completely surprised that I'd actually written a whole thing. They read it and they really liked it. And a few weeks later, I got a call from someone at BBC TV, and it was the head of programs, and he said, we've read your screenplay, we'd love to produce it. We've sent it to this young director called Danny Boyle. He loves it. He would like to direct it. I didn't know who Danny Boyle was. He hadn't at the time become a filmmaker. He'd made lots of TV. He was quite famous in that world, but I didn't know the world of TV. And Danny Boyle directed it, and 6 months after he finished my TV movie, he shot his first feature, Shallow Grave, and then shortly after that, Trainspotting, and he's best known now for Slumdog Millionaire. But the experience of working with Danny was just amazing, and that was what it was actually working with him that, in hindsight, made me want to direct. Danny's professional background was quite similar to mine in the sense that he started his career at the Royal Court Theatre, where I had started my playwriting career. And where actually, more than at university, I learned really to write plays and to write dialogue and to direct. Because at the Royal Court, when they took you in, you became part of, it was like you adopted into this huge family. And for 3 years, I was there almost every day of the week. You were part of the team of people who read every play that was submitted to the theatre, and you had a voice in selecting plays that actually got produced, and you were free to go and watch rehearsals, which I did. So that's where, and Danny started that way. And after that collaboration with Danny, I got inundated. I was with offers, with screenplay commissions, and I took them on, and I wrote quite a few, and I wasn't happy with a single with the outcome of any one of them. All the directors that I worked with were not Danny Boyle. They were not. And Danny explained this to me. He said, they're not bad directors. He said that directing is a form of writing. If you're going to direct a play or a screenplay, you have to make it yours. and you have to completely make it yours. And in the process of making someone else's story yours, you completely write them out, write their vision out of it, if you don't have the gift of empathy, you know. And he said to me, if you should stop complaining and just go bloody direct your own stuff, if you're not happy with what people are doing. And so that's when I decided to start directing. And it's been a very, very long journey, you know. And I still consider myself to be a novelist. I've got a few novels in me yet, but since I directed Half of a Yellow Sun, the movie that's showing tomorrow in the festival, I directed an 8-part TV series for MTV, and then last year I went to Lagos and shot a movie, which is going to be my second feature. It's called 50. It's about 4 women who are about to turn 50. And it's the way I kind of try to describe it to people. It's like it's Sex and the City meets Waiting to Exhale, set in Lagos, and seen in my conception of it through the prisms of Robert Altman in one of his more benign explorations of the darker reaches of the human psyche. You know, it's but I've been in post-production with that now for a couple of months. I was in the editing room 2 days ago. You know, I was on the phone on Viber to my editor for about 2 hours, you know, last night. And at the end of this month, I'm going back to Lagos to direct a 6-part TV series for MTV. And this morning when I woke up, I was looking at the screenplay of a screenplay that I've been working on for like 10 years, which The Kiss was meant to be a kind of taster of. And I've been rewriting it, writing and rewriting it, and I'm hoping that's going to be my next feature. It's set in London, and that's a very short version of my my career as a writer. Any questions, comments? Be welcome. There's a lady there.
What is your favorite work if you're to pick a favorite?
My favorite is always whatever I've just finished working on. I mean, seriously. Yeah, I have one or two, well, at least one novel that I was quite happy with when I finished writing it. Quite happy when it was published, and then I reread it sometime after, and I thought I would have done this differently. I would have done that differently. And then I reread it a few years ago. I thought, it's what it was. I mean, that was where I was at the time I wrote it. It's art. It's not about you. I'm not a cynical person. I'm very passionate about what I do, and when I'm doing it, I give it everything that I can. And after a while, writing a story, writing a screenplay is, as one of my mentors at the Royal Court said to me, it's not, you don't write a play, you rewrite a play into existence. It's like sculpting, you keep going until it's completely subjective, until you come to a point where you think, I've got nothing more to give this thing. And you let it go. You let it go, and very clever people and some not so clever people, adopt it, and they say things about it, and you just go on to the next project, because actually what I found is, although of course, it's always great to be praised, it's nice for your ego, but actually high praise is almost as bad as negative, malicious criticism. They kind of make you self-conscious. So you just, you do your thing, and you move on to the next project, Like Half of a Yellow Sun, this movie, when I cast one of the principal characters, I cast an actress called Tandy Newton, who is English Zimbabwean. The character in my book is Nigerian. But I cast Tandy because I genuinely thought she was the best person. I mean, it's subjective. I was directing it. And I had lots of people who, who felt that I should have gone to this actress, you should have gone to that actress, you should, And I said, that's all valid, but I'm directing it. I wouldn't know how to actually, I knew I could get a specific kind of performance from Tandy, and I got it, and I'm really happy with it. And the people who still think I'm wrong, but actually I'm talking to her about another project, because, if I was listening to the criticism, I would never go near her again, because, but actually it doesn't work that way. It's like I didn't choose her because I wanted to annoy people. I asked her to play the part because I thought I'm a big fan of her work. I think she's a great actor, and that's how it goes for me. Sorry, who?
Would you say it's fair, would you think it's fair to say that you're really going subjective and objective back and forth all the time? Because those points of empathy, you made the comment that directing, like reading, the points of empathy, and those points of empathy is kind of by individual or timing, you may feel it more here or more there, and somebody else, it could be different. That when you then go into directing and you're dealing with that with your actors, is it a meld?
Well,
do you feel?
Yeah, I think the sort of writers and filmmakers that I really love, whose work I really love, are filmmakers who are not provincial, who are like, some of my favorite filmmakers are people like Danny Boyle. Danny Boyle, he kind of goes to India, makes a movie about, and it's not about his own, view or his own, it's about those kids. People like Clint Eastwood, I genuinely am a big, Clint would direct anyone from any culture, and, it's their story. John Sayles, who is not as well known as Clint Eastwood. Yeah, he did that. Yeah. And people like Ousmane Sembène, the Senegalese filmmaker, who has made some great movies about women, and always not about his own. It's never about him. It's about the character story, and I most of the time, I don't know if you.
Well, I don't know, I get the feeling that with him, that as he's writing the story or directing it and making the movie, the whole shebang, he's actually in the process of learning about it.
Okay, I don't know that much about him. So, no, you're right, yeah. No, absolutely, yeah, and that I like to, yeah, no, that's how I like to work too. I mean, oh yeah, I mean, I like when I'm directing, I work with casting directors, and some of the best casting choices I've made have been in situations where a casting director said, I think this person is right, and I would be completely 100% convinced they were not, and we'd have a long conversation, and I listen, and I would be completely convinced that they were wrong, and then I would go back to my hotel or go back home, and at night I would kind of wake up and think, completely right. There was one thing I didn't see that they saw, and I think that casting is very, very, very important. I think for a director, it's like when you have a script that you're happy with, then 99% of the and you have a really good crew around you. 99% of your work is done in casting. Because a scene in any movie is only as good as the weakest actor in it. It doesn't matter if you have Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. If you have someone playing a waiter who basically just does something that doesn't work at all, it ruins the entire scene. So, casting is seriously, absolutely important. And once you've cast right, then the question of empathy with your actors is actually a non-question, because if you cast right, they just do everything. You're just almost a spectator. Or once in a while, you say, okay, can we? It's not about nuance. You say, okay, can we have a little more of that or a little less of that? If you cast badly, then you're in trouble, because then you get into huge rows with your actor all the time because they see the character this way and you see the character that way. I always blame the director in situations like that. I would blame myself, Does that answer your question?
I just find it intriguing, because when I'm teaching writing, which wasn't my first background, I try to get my students to kind of become a different person, put on a different hat when it comes time to edit.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, you need the empathy, and you need to find empathy in your audience, because that's where you're going to connect. So it's very interesting that aspect.
No, absolutely.
But then also to be able to and be very objective about your own work.
You have to. I mean, when I wrote my most recent novel, Burma Boy, I wrote it from the point of view of the little I remembered about my dad. My dad died a long time ago, long before I wrote the novel. And when I sat down to write it, even though one of the characters was based on him, I realized actually I didn't know much about him. But I remembered him, I had a kind of general idea of him, and he was someone who, apart from Burma, he went to Burma to fight for the British, and then he came back to Nigeria, and he never traveled out of the country. But he was a British subject, and he called England the mother country, even though he'd never been to England. And the proudest thing he did in his life was to go to Burma to fight for the British. That was his point of view. That was the point of view of people his generation. And so I write the book from their point of view. And my editor in London, and quite a few people, and some reviewers, when it came out, were astonished, and some were offended, because they said, well, how come this African soldiers, this African people, who were exploited by colonial power, who kind of sent them to a war that had nothing to do, how come they're not resentful? How come, I'm like, well, you might be, I might be, they were not. I'm not actually writing about me. I'm writing about these characters, not about what Biyi thinks of it. And there are writers who there's some amazing writers who can only write characters with whom they share absolutely everything in common. I'm not one of those. I really am not. I kind of, yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, okay.
I had this very difficult question. I wondered if you saw it in film or with the digital camera when you did the short, and then when you did the Walk in the Sun, or the hat.
With the digital, yeah, the short was what we did that with a digital camera. I mean, we did that that was what we got all the equipment for free. I mean, we didn't pay a penny, so that was, we shot with what we had. With Half of a Yellow Sun, I wanted to shoot on film. Partly because it was my first film, it was a big film. By Hollywood standard, it wasn't. I mean, it was like $10 million, but that's, I haven't got $10 million in a bank account, so it was a lot of money, and it took years to prepare. And because we were going to shoot in this part of Nigeria, we shot some of it in places, in jungles that would have sat really well for some of the scenes in Apocalypse Now. I mean, there was some kind of really tough places, and And I was worried. I wanted to use technology that had been around for like 100 years, that had been used in every kind of weather. And the 35mm camera was one of those. I didn't want to go there with a digital camera and find that it was melting in the sun. You know, I mean, I was just paranoid. I was just worried. And my DP shared my anxiety, and so we persuaded the producers to allow us to shoot on 35mm. And it looks, it looks gorgeous. It looks amazing. But 50, when I went to shoot 50, we were shooting in Lagos, and I decided to use to shoot on the Alexa, which is a digital, but we shot in what's called RAW. So it's the next best thing to shooting on film. Actually, I don't think it's best on. Digital has come such a long way now. I don't expect to shoot film like anytime soon. I love film, but I'm really happy with digital technology too. It's just a tool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So my question is, because of your cross talent as a novelist and as a filmmaker and as a writer for the stage, and the new success of Happy Yellow Sun, do you find that external forces are like pulling you more toward filmmaking? And if they are, how do you feel about that? And how do you keep yourself? You said I consider myself as a novelist. So how do you
I consider myself a novelist still, but I know that I'm a filmmaker as well. I'm a writer director. I don't know. I couldn't say convincingly. That is to say, I couldn't actually. I believe myself if I said I still saw myself as a playwright. But I will. But I'm pretty sure I will someday again write a play. I still love theater, but I prefer film as a medium. I prefer film basically because although it's much more expensive, it's much more egalitarian. And I can, when I was writing plays in the UK, and as you said, I had plays on in like every important theater in the UK, and this plays would be put on, some for months and months, and then I would go to Nigeria, and I still, London is home for me. I know London. I've lived longer in London than I lived anywhere else in the world, and it's home. But I still feel very Nigerian, and Nigeria is very important to me. And my plays weren't put on in Nigeria because plays are very expensive to put on. And film, for me, the great thing about film is I can just take a DVD, and it's, Half Yellow Sun, when it opened, they tried to prevent it for all sorts of stupid reasons. They tried to prevent it from opening in the cinemas in Nigeria, and then eventually common sense prevailed and they allowed it to open. And within the first 2 weeks of Happy Yellow Sun opening, it was seen by more people than had seen all of the plays I've ever written, like together all the time. Although some, it kind of broke box office records, but also the pirates just went to town, and it was. But it's a reality. It's a fact of life in Nigeria. They would. So I actually no one. If anything, I really love the hustle and bustle of filmmaking. It's tough. It kind of takes you. Someone once said to me that the process of trying to get a film made is they kind of put it in terms of like this metaphor of someone holding an elephant's tail. Someone actually trying to get an elephant to move, and the elephant is not going anywhere, and they're trying to get it to move, and it's not going anywhere. And that's what happens when you are in development, when you're writing the script, and all the producers keeps, they're unhappy with it, and then you you go into pre-production, when it's been green lit. And that's when the elephant starts walking slowly and you're kind of going and you're really happy. And then the moment the shoot starts, the elephant is running and you're holding the tail and you're trying to get it to stop and it just drags you, and you just hold on for dear life, And it's and some people love that, some don't. I love the whole process, But I still have I have a novel that I want to find some time, either late this year or early next year. I want to just go away somewhere for 3 months and write a very rough first draft, and then I love writing novels, so if there's any struggle is actually within me, not nothing external, and it's not, for me, it's not either or. It's just actually, sorry.
Go ahead. Okay, so my question is based on the film. So how do you feel like you represented the twins? How do you feel like they represented Nigeria, like as, two different sides?
Well, an American filmmaker whose work I really like, Orson Welles, once he made a movie based on a book by Kafka, and I've forgotten which one, but it's something I've seen. The Trial, yeah, and there's a scene in it where there are lots of candles, and some people read those candles as metaphors and whatever, and he said that's fine, you can read metaphors into that, but they're just candles as far as I'm concerned. I just lit the scene. I thought it would look great, and that's it. And I have that attitude from take a book and you translate it to a new medium. I kind of go for, I try to create 3-dimensional characters. And if you turn your characters into metaphors, there's a very real danger that at best they become archetypes. At worst, they become seriously one-dimensional because they just become, there's no texture to them. It's just about this is what they're about and nothing else. And so I deliberately didn't actually talk to my actors about whether one of them represented this or that. It was just there were two people who were temperamentally, polar opposites, and that's what if a viewer watching it decides to say, okay, this person represents that part of Nigeria, that's fine with me, but that's not what I'm doing. Which is not to say that that's not what Chimamanda. I've read that book. I had to read it dozens of times, and there's nowhere in the book where she says, "Oh, this character represents." Although you can read it, it's implicit, But I didn't want that. I didn't want to make that kind of. I don't have that kind of sensibility. I'm not saying that the other sensibility is wrong. It's just that's not.
I mean, it makes sense, but it's just because, like, when you in the film, it's just like you see two different. So you could, yes.
Oh, okay.
We see it in the class. So.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize. Okay. So I didn't realize anyone had seen it.
Yeah.
So we have one class in here that has seen the film and another that hasn't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we're writing an essay on that right now.
So what was your inspiration for writing the screenplay for the film? Did you want to retell the history of Nigeria in some way as to what happened like after the independence, the aftermath of that, or did you want to put a human face onto it and tell a storyline within the historical frame?
Yeah, I mean the simple answer to that is shortly after Danny Boyle advised me to direct my own work, I started looking for material, and the first material that I found that seemed to have the possibility of being being the basis for an interesting movie was a short story by a Nigerian writer called Chinua Achebe, and the short story is called Girls at War. And I wrote a screenplay, and I spent years trying to raise funding for it, and it just didn't happen. And then I ran into Chimamanda at a literary event, and she told me about this book she was writing, and she said it was part of it was set during the Nigerian Civil War, the Biafra War, and she said it was inspired partly by Chinua Achebe's Girls at War. And I said, oh, I've got to read this, and I read the book the moment it came out, and it was inspired by Girls at War, but she'd taken it to another totally different level, and I read it and I loved it, and I was also particularly drawn to it because I got to a stage where I was really fed up with the sort of films that seemed permitted about Africa, movies from Constant Gardner to The Last King of Scotland. Now, the producers of Constant Gardner and Last King of Scotland actually produced my movie, so I'm not, and I love those movies, but they're movies where the Africans in them are almost like bystanders in their own story, in their own history. Their stories has to be mediated by a white character, and I have no problem with that. But there are, and the kind of the characters in Half of the Other Son, Kainene, Odenigbo, Olana, and all of the intellectuals. You never see them in any of they exist. I mean, there are there are people like me, people like Chiwetel, they're like hundreds of thousands of them, and we don't exist. It's like the only kind of African story that's allowed is a story where you pity, this. And for me, these characters were just a great opportunity to say, well, there are these other kinds of Africans, there are these sorts of African narratives, and that was actually the big draw for me. It wasn't, the history was fine, but it was that more than anything else that made me. Yeah, sorry, you.
This is just kind of on the same note. Do you think that there's going to be as a multicultural film grows, less of the white savior type attitude in historical epics? It's you see it even in Avatar, movies like that. And do you think that there's going to be more movies moving away from that now?
Oh, I mean, I actually love Avatar, but you see, what I'm actually saying. What I'm actually saying is that it's not that movies like that shouldn't be made. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's also this other narrative, that's equally valid, equally relevant. Why aren't there stories being made about those characters, about those situations? That's all I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, the psychological thriller that I've written in London, has actually it's got black characters in it, but it's got a lot of the leads are whites. I'm not, So did you have?
I did. So were the characters mostly fictional? In the half a Yellow Sun.
In the book or in
the movie.
The book, the movie is based on the book, and Chimamanda, who wrote the book, told me that the character of Odenigbo. Have you seen the movie? Okay. She said that character was based on her dad, but she said it was a kind of what if. Her dad wasn't a philanderer. He didn't sleep with the house girl. But he was a professor of mathematics at the University of Nigeria in Nsukka. Olana was based on her mom. and Kainene was based on some aunts, but they were not twin sisters. They were not, you know. And the houseboy Ugu was based on her parents' houseboy, you know, a kid who grew up with them, who was sent to school by her parents. Okioma, Odenibu's best friend, who features much more in the book than he does, is based on Christopher Okibo, a poet, a Nigerian poet who decided, when the war broke out in 1967, he joined the army on the Biafran side, and he was killed in action. And so it's fiction, but you know, it's based. I mean, the war did happen, you know. So yeah. Oh, okay, another one for you.
Do you feel like you get more accurate expression of what you were initially trying to convey from films or from writing books?
I don't know. I don't think one is more accurate than the other. I think I have my my kind of sensibility as a novelist, as a writer, is very literary, which is, you know, I can't do anything about that. But that's what it is. My sensibility as a filmmaker is like, if you between Jim Jarmusch and Clint Eastwood, whose movies would I choose to go to a time again? It would be Clint Eastwood. I love Jim Jarmusch, you know, but sometimes I kind of sit, you know, just scratching my chin watching when, you know, some of those movies he makes without a plot, but which cinephiles love, you know. I kind of make, when we did a test screening of Half a Yellow Sun, I sat with my producer and people were coming in. Remember, people we didn't know, and they were coming into the cinema with popcorns, and you know, my producer groaned, like, you know, they're going to be, and I'm like, those are the people I've made the movie for. You know, my sensibility as a filmmaker is very inclusive, and it's not commercial so much as it's just. I do want someone who has a 9-to-5 job, who doesn't go to the cinema more than once, twice a month, to actually enjoy the movie and not think that they have to have a degree in the history of cinema to actually understand my movies, you know. Yeah. I don't think one is more authentic than the other, but that's just, yeah. Yeah.
I just have a question, it's kind of not off that subject. Do you feel that food, like, in your culture brings family together, or just like
Food?
Yeah, like cooking, you know, because in my culture it is, but I've seen in the movie that it was always like, there was always some type of like food that bring everybody together, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's that kind of features a lot more even in the book. Yeah. And again, it wasn't some kind of metaphor for me in the movie.
You feel that in your culture, food
yeah,
is like...
I mean, yeah, it's food, and it's, you know, the way in the book and in the movie people kind of socialize is always either around alcohol or around book. You know, it's just any excuse for a party. You know, you know. So yeah.
You're leaving?
Was there fighting going on while you were shooting?
Oh, how much of the film I shot in Nigeria, and was there fighting going on? Well, you know, Nigeria has northeastern Nigeria has been in a state of war for quite a few years now. But Nigeria is a huge country, and okay. Actually, the first question, yeah, I shot. It was a 33-day shoot, and 31 of those days were in Nigeria. We did 3 days in London, but that was actually on a sound stage. And that was something that was more to do with accountants, it's to do with tax credits. That's not the honest truth. We could have shot everything in Nigeria. We shot the movie in the Niger Delta, which part of the Niger Delta, you've got insurgents. You've got people who are always engaging with the Nigerian army and getting killed and killing soldiers. But in the part of the Niger Delta that we shot my movie in Cross River State, it's the only state in the entire Niger Delta that doesn't have oil. And because it doesn't have oil, there's no fighting. Nobody, so it's incredibly peaceful. I had a crew that was made up of people from about 25 different countries, some of whom came to Calabar for nearly 6 months, pre-production, production, and then they stayed on. And we didn't have a single security incident. I had about 80 South African members of my crew who are like really hardworking human beings, and they partied like hell. They kind of, they went partying, went clubbing all the time, and we didn't have a single security incident. What we did have was a lot of people falling ill with malaria because the mosquitoes were out there, and we had a few incidents of typhoid. Although I'm told now by a doctor friend of mine that the typhoid diagnosis was they were just like false positives, but the malaria we definitely did have. And during the period when we were shooting the movie, there were explosions going off in the north, but it's like thousands of miles away.
So the ones in the movie were actually staged?
No, that was, everything was staged, absolutely everything. Oh yeah. Yeah.
How did you like working with Dandi and then the main character? I can't pronounce his name.
What, Chiwetel?
Yes. How did you? Because I feel like Dandi is like a really. Yeah, she's a really great actress. So, how did that experience go with you?
It was great. With Tandy, which is actually why it was really ironic when some people attacked me for casting her. It took me 3 years to convince her to actually take on the role. Yeah, she said yes, and then she said no, and then she said yes, and then she said no. And her agent, I spoke to her agent, and her agent said that Tandy was scared of the character, that so strong. And so she just kept. She did a great job. Yeah, she did. Yeah. And so it was actually quite great. But Chiwetel he's a consummate professional. He's just an amazing actor, and he would sometimes send me text messages at 5 a.m, asking very detailed questions about scenes we were shooting later that day, and and before, he's very technical as well. He would, after each take, he would actually come and watch what he'd done on the monitor. But he's not doing it. Some actors just do it out of vanity. Chiwetel is doing something very cold-blooded. He's watching himself as if it was some stranger, and he's looking and he'll say, okay, I'll do that differently, and then he'll go and do it differently. And Tandy doesn't work that way. She's much more intuitive, but seeing Chiwetel do that actually helped a lot, because Tandy when she finally accepted the role, she said to me, okay, she said, I just worked with Oliver Stone. She played Condoleezza Rice really beautifully in a movie. And she said, he just said, Tandy, just go and, create this character. He didn't direct me. And she said, I don't want you to direct me. And I'm thinking, okay, but because Chiwetel just kept coming up to me and saying, she allowed me to direct her. She allowed me to, again, because I knew that I'd cast the right person. It wasn't, when I say director, I'm not teaching how to act. I don't know how to teach anyone to act. It's just about nuances in what you're doing. There's a scene, for instance, where she is talking to, Tandy's character is talking to Anika Noni Rose's character. Tandy's character doesn't really have a line, but it's a very important scene. And Tandy has this chick that she has, I've seen in many movies, where if she doesn't have dialogue, she kind of does this thing, like, someone is talking to her. It's something we do in real life. On camera, on a movie, it just looks too busy. It looks like you don't know what you're doing, and so you don't know what to do. And I said, just keep still, and I said it a few times, and she got really pissed off with me. Like, she got really furious, and then I said, look, do your own, and then do mine, please, and then we'll watch it together, and you decide which you prefer. And we did both, and she looked at it, and after, she loved what I told her to do, and after that, she trusted me, but it was,
She was so great in her line delivery when she was just laying there. She said, "I slept with Richard."
I know.
oh yeah.
That was a great part.
Yeah.
And I understand she was really sick, yeah?
Sorry?
Was Candy really sick?
Well, I was diagnosed with typhoid. She was diagnosed with typhoid. I don't actually, at the time, I don't actually know, I couldn't tell you what it feels like to have typhoid. I know I was diagnosed with it, but I didn't have any of the textbook symptoms. Tandy didn't have any either. And a friend of mine, a doctor, that's what I was saying earlier, told me that there were just false positives, that said it's possible we had some kind of malaria, and we actually had, we'd all received vaccination against typhoid. So, it was a tough shoot for everyone. It was a really, really, really tough shoot. And she was amazing. Yeah.
Well, she was an amazing actress.
Yeah.
An amazing film.
It was amazing.
Shot by an amazing director.
Yeah.
Thank you.